Hi, I'm Barbara Coward from MBA 360 Admissions. Welcome to Your Story is Your Strategy, crafting a compelling MBA narrative. I am super excited to have the opportunity to share some insights to help you gain a competitive advantage in the admissions process. So let's start with a classroom in a business school. The job of the admissions office is to fill the seats with students who will be strong academic performers, will be able to achieve their career objectives. And they're doing that for every seat. So as you embark on the admissions journey, picture yourself in this classroom, and your job is to convince the admissions office that that one seat that you want to claim is going to be made to the best use. They're going to get a strong return on investment for it. And this is why I show this slide, is because, a lot of people will say, hey, look what I have to offer. I have this, I have that, I have that. Well, guess what? A lot of people have a lot of things to offer. And so again, the challenge for the admissions office is how do you take all those applications and narrow them down to the number of seats that are available? So this is why I want you to start thinking like an admissions officer, and why we're starting here with this particular slide. So one of the things that I have been studying in the amount of time, which has been a while, many years in this industry, is why is it that exceptionally great candidates with really strong GPAs, really solid test scores, why do they get rejected? And why do some other candidates who are below the class average with grades or their test scores get accepted? Why is that? And this slide here really shows that how it's laid out. If you look on the left-hand side of the slide, those are all individuals with low scores, those little red triangles, who got into some very competitive schools. So it's not just about your academic performance, your test scores, and your GPA. Along those lines, I'll do a lot of consultations with people, and they'll say, hey, I got a whatever score on my GMAT. What are my chances of getting in? It's really hard to know that because there's so many other components involved. And that's what we just talked about. You can have a really perfect score and not get in. You can have a score that's below average and get in. Likewise with the GPA. So coming back to this theme of thinking like an admissions director, that's going to help you kind of turn around the process to see things from their perspective so you can have a stronger application. And the first thing to keep in mind is that as an applicant, I could ask you a question. Are you a customer for the business school, or are you going to be a product? Well, when you pay your fee for the application fee, and certainly when you pay for the tuition, it feels like you're a customer. But this is the thing, schools also see you as the product. It's not just the faculty who are going to be your instructors, it's your peers, your classmates who are going to bring in their life experiences to help you learn how to see things from another point of view that you might not have seen before. And so they're evaluating you, the admissions office, not just as an individual, but as a member of the entire cohort. One of the challenges for admissions officers is time constraints. You look at some of the schools that have the really high volume of applications. Sometimes they will bring in some people to do seasonal reading, but nonetheless, they really, it's hard to have a complete staff for everything that you want to do. And when I was reading as a seasonal reader, I was told I had 15 minutes to read a file. And I'll tell you, if that has, the transcript, the letters of recommendation, the essays, all of that, maybe interview notes, that's a lot to get through in 15 minutes. Now, I have asked some business schools in terms of what their time period is, and I've heard more along the lines of 30 minutes. But even so, think of you have 30 minutes to persuade them, and keep that in mind when you're building your application. So I'd like for you to think in terms of jobs to be done. It's kind of a variation of the late, great Clayton Christensen, who was a faculty member and a prominent one at Harvard Business School. He wrote research and conducted research and wrote articles about jobs to be done. And this is how I view this particular process. There are certain jobs to be done that the admissions officer has to do. And then there's jobs that you have to do. And if you break it down and map that out, I think it'll make sense or be a little bit clearer in terms of how you can gain a competitive advantage in the process. So on the left side of the screen, if I am the admissions officer and I'm reading your file, 30 minutes, perhaps, I'm going to have a lot of questions going through my head. Can the applicant handle the work? Now, they say they want to go to A to B for their short-term goals and then their long-term goals. Can we help them get there? Is this feasible? Is this doable? And then also, is this person a great fit for the cohort? So if you thrive in a case study learning environment, for example, Harvard Business School, Darden, 2 examples right there, then, that's something they're thinking about. Yeah, we can see this person in the classroom contributing to the conversation, elevating the conversation, providing additional insight. But if you're somebody who, prefers experiential learning, you do get that too in all the programs. They tend to have a blend, but that's something that they're going to keep in mind. Are you going to be a fit for the program? Because, this is one of my secrets of having been on the other side, is it's really hard after somebody is accepted into the program and is on campus and they just don't work out. It's just really, really tough for everyone involved, for the applicant, for the student, for the admissions office, for the student services, faculty, everyone. And so this whole process, this vetting process, is really to make sure that whoever arrives on campus is going to be a good fit. Okay, so that's what's going through the admissions officer's mind. Now, your job to do to help them with that, can you handle the work? That's the question. Your job, provide them with proof points that you can handle the work. Can they help you achieve your goals? Prove that your goals are realistic and achievable. Maybe you have an ambitious goal that might not be likely, but schools always encourage you to be authentic with your career goals. Maybe in your application, your essay, you say, this is my dream goal, but my backup is to do this. Again, you want to make sure it's realistic and achievable. Business schools and career offices have to report the percentage of students employed 3 months after graduation. You don't ever want those numbers to go down. Speaking on behalf of schools, having been there, you want them to stay the same or ideally go up. So they're looking at every person going, is this, if we have 92% of our students employed from the last graduating class after graduation, what is this class going to be 92 or 93 or higher, or is it going to dip down? So those are the things that are going through their mind. Again, they're not doing this to be difficult, to put you on the spot per se, but again, it's this vetting process because it is a lot easier to do it at this stage than before you are a student, right? You can't just arrive for 2 weeks and then they try it out and they decide whether you stay or not. Okay, and then if you're a good fit, what is your story? This is the topic of this presentation. How are you going to show up on campus? And that's where you want to have a very persuasive story to give them a vision of what you'll be like when you're on campus. So, we talked about earlier about the academic proof points, the GPA, the test scores, but the importance here is having that strategic story because, again, your job isn't to make the admin's job easier necessarily, but you want it to be easy for them to understand who you are. And that's where you can really make a big difference in terms of how you put your resume together, how you put your essays together. I always say it's not a scavenger hunt. You don't want them to have to work hard. When they're reading file after file after file, and so many of them in a row, you want it to be easy for them to see who you are. So help them do that. And then also help them visualize your contribution to the cohort. What are you going to bring to the program that's going to enrich the experience for everyone else? We're going back to that earlier slide that I talked about how they're building a cohort and not just looking at individual candidates. And your job is to help them make the decision. Now, you and I both know that your job, the ideal end goal, is to get them to say yes, right? But the truth of the matter is, we don't have a crystal ball. If anyone says they can give you a percentage certainty that you'll get in, that's something that I would be very apprehensive about. And so what you want to do is really give them the information so they can get to know you and help them make that informed decision. And the key word is informed. So you're not just applying. This is an exercise in persuasion. When people work with admissions consultants, for example, they talk about editing through essays. I don't think of it that way. I think it more as a strategic kind of mindset in terms of how to make an argument, almost like a lawyer, to persuade them to accept you into the program. So, what are the foundations of a persuasive story? You might know from reading some stories of your own in the past, but I'll just walk you through them here. You want to have a clear and compelling purpose or mission. The way when we have information overload, the way that we process information and remember information, it's through shortcuts, right? And so that's what I like to say when I'm working with candidates. I'm like, a couple bullets. Oh, you're the person from, I don't know, Columbia, who's worked in private equity, who loves tennis, just these little shortcuts, and really making it easier in terms of understanding who you are. And then the unique experience, I'm smiling with this and I completely understand and get it. But a lot of times I'll work with people and they're like, oh, no, I've traveled to a lot of countries. I'm like, yeah, well, so has everyone else. So again, you're working with people applying to elite business schools who've had some phenomenal life experiences. Go beyond that, right? If you've traveled to other countries, is there a theme there? Are you traveling to countries that are emerging markets? Are you traveling to countries that are, have experienced high GDP? What is it about those? Do you have a particular interest in a part of the world that you're focused on? Think about how to really make that unique. And same thing too with resumes and like skills and hobbies. I'll see cooking, I'll see things like that, I'll see books. I'm like, that doesn't tell you anything. Everyone will have that. Not everyone, but a lot of people. But what kind of cooking? Are you somebody who's really into, making homemade sushi, or, you make this amazing, spaghetti sauce because the recipe came down from grandparents. That's the kind of thing where you want to really dig deeper to show your unique experience. Schools also really value resilience. So you want to talk about, if you have one, don't make them up. So if you don't, challenge or barrier that you've overcome. And you might think, well, I really haven't, but everyone usually has something, right? It could be somebody who maybe is an introvert who struggled to speak up in meetings. It could be somebody who, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of some other ideas, was, advanced really quickly and was working with people where they were the youngest person on their team and they really felt like they weren't being taken seriously. Think about your personal life, professional life, and think about something that you've done that shows your resilience. And that could be a theme that you could perhaps bring into your application and part of your persuasive story. Also, you want to show a trajectory of improvement or growth. So persuasive story, again, as you think of all, kind of movies, etc., they're ones that talk about persuasive growth, how the character, the protagonist, was in a jam or was limited, but somehow maybe through meeting another person or through a life experience, they grew. And so that's something else to keep in mind. Okay, and what kind of life lessons and values have shaped you? Again, sometimes, this is another thing to think about. I do a lot of interview prep, and sometimes when I'm doing mock interviews, I'll do the behavioral interviews. And I'll say, tell me about a time when you went out of your way to help somebody at work. Tell me about a time when you faced an ethical decision. Tell me about a time when you saw somebody who wasn't being included and you brought them into the fold. And when we're practicing these questions, a lot of times I'll get lost in the answers because they're into so much detail and they go very long because you've lived that experience, but the person on the other side hasn't. And so what you want to do with a persuasive story is really, again, those shortcuts. Make it easy. Touch on the high notes. Basically, tell a story that somebody can understand quickly because they won't be able to be persuaded unless they understand that. And you don't want to get them lost. Once they're lost, you've lost their attention, and that's never good. Anyway, so that's my some thoughts for you to consider for a persuasive story. Okay. One of the things, well, there are many things, but one of the things that prospective clients often tell me is like, you know your life, right? You've lived it. But they don't know what stories to tell or what ones would really be, appropriate. Maybe they have some really good stories, but they're worried about how it might come across or how it would reflect on them. Or they have so many stories. That's happened as well. People are like, I have all these stories to tell. Which one should I do? So I wanted to give you some tips for that. Here's my little movie reference back to Indiana Jones back in my day. And I always say, you want to work like an archaeologist. Go back over your life and look for clues that could come up, right? Don't leave anything unturned. And this is where you can ask family and friends and people who know you for, I actually had somebody a client, actually asked his therapist about a prompt and some ideas what to bring up based on what she knew about this person. So again, just think about that in terms of, we talked about family, friends, classmates, coworkers, see what you're posting on social media. Just, maybe just get a, you take notes and maybe put all different, kind of map out all the different possibilities. But again, a lot of times I'll talk to people and they'll say like, yeah, I didn't want to bring up that story because I didn't think it was important enough, or I was worried how it would come across. This is where I see the big missed opportunity, is not telling a story that could really move the needle for you. So again, make sure you dig through all of your contacts and your past. Maybe go back, look at photos that you've shared to get some ideas of what you could use for your story. So again, the end goal, and I'm very focused on the goal, is to craft a memorable story that is easily remembered and repeatable. What do I mean by that? I mean that if an admissions officer is reading your file and then they later have to go into the admissions committee and argue on your behalf. I used to do that. I used to read, make decisions, but then I used to have to present it to a committee. It's easier if I have, again, those shortcuts. Okay, who is that person? Oh yeah, they're from this country, they're in this field, this is their kind of unique hobby or whatever. And so make it easy for them to advocate for you. And the first thing, again, of course, going back to the beginning, is provide that evidence that you'll succeed in the program. You might have this amazing professional journey. You might have some really cool things that you've done, but business schools are part of universities, and universities are academic institutions. And the admissions office is the front office on behalf of the faculty. And so what you want to do is provide that assurance that you're not going to be a risk, right? Remember what I talked about earlier? It's easier to not have somebody come in the program than it is for them to come in and have it be not a good situation a couple weeks or a month into it. So provide that proof point that you are going to succeed in the program. But here's something else I want you to do. And this is going above and beyond, I think, what a lot of people think, is that you want to show how the cohort is going to be better off with you in it. You want to show that the cost of not having you in the program could possibly be even greater than the benefit of having you in the program. Again, why have you? they say yes to you, going back to that first slide of all the seats, that means they have to say no to someone else. They can't wheel in another chair. So you've got to show that what you're going to bring in and that return on investment of having you in the seat and what you're going to do and all of that is going to be a win-win for everyone. And then again, realistic goals. Provide that assurance that you can get from your goal to your destination. Going back again, think like a business goal. Turn yourself kind of inside out, if I can say that. Careers Office reports every year. I just saw one today, a prominent business school that just released their employment reports for 2025, which was interesting since the class graduated last summer, but nonetheless. And I've never read one, right, that talks about, oh gosh, we had some students struggle here, but these students did great. They're always polished. They're always telling the good news, right? These are marketing machines. Business schools, they practice what they preach. But you want to provide that assurance that you are going to be a success story in that reporting. So you need to provide that assurance that they're not going to have to worry about you, and also that you're not going to expect them to do all the work. I think some people think, oh great, I'm going to go to business school, I'm just going to take the test, I'm going to get there, I'm going to sit in class, I'm going to do the work, and then career services will find the job. They do not like that at all. They're there to help you. I'm not saying that they aren't there to do something for you. They certainly are. They're building those relationships with employers. They're organizing the conferences. They're doing all of that. But they want you to put some skin in the game too. So you want to show what you're going to do to make the most of this situation. One of the essay prompts, talks about when you're applying it to business school, about how would you make the most of all the opportunities on campus during your experience here. So those are just some of the ideas of what you can do in terms of the story to help you be distinctive and to help them understand what you bring to the program and to help them, if needed, advocate for you. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful to walk you through some ideas of how you can gain a competitive advantage in the selective admissions process and look at it from other sides, not just from your own perspective of applying, but from the school's perspective of building a cohort and making sure, for instance, that the students who come into the program are going to be academically qualified to succeed in the program, and also who want to make a career pivot are going to be able to do so. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.